You're listening to Underground USA News.
Thursday, September 4th, 2025. In a rare display of judicial dissent bordering on usurpation, a dozen federal judges have expressed frustration with the Supreme Court's tendency to overturn lower court rulings in cases involving President Trump, often with minimal explanation, leaving district judges without clear guidance. These judges, speaking from the shadows of anonymity, argue that the High Court's brief emergency orders undermine their authority and create perceptions of bias or incompetence, particularly as they contend the Supreme Court appears to favor Trump's agenda. This ideologically leftist reasoning risks fueling claims of a judicial coup from Trump allies, while Chief Justice John Roberts faces calls to defend lower courts amid rising threats against judges. This ongoing tension highlights the need for a judiciary that respects the rule of law and the Constitution and provides transparent, principled decisions to maintain public trust. It also begs Congress to address the purview of a radicalized district court bench. The U.S. National Security Agency has issued a stark warning about ongoing Chinese cyberattacks led by the state-sponsored group Salt Typhoon, which has penetrated telecommunications, government and critical infrastructure networks across the U.S. and over 80 countries since at least 2021, believed to be orchestrated by China's Ministry of State Security. The group has exploited vulnerabilities in devices like Cisco routers to steal sensitive data, including network configurations and administrator credentials, potentially compromising national security. The FBI, alongside international partners, has highlighted the group's sophisticated methods, such as using Windows kernel mode rootkits to evade detection, emphasizing the urgent need for robust cybersecurity measures to protect American infrastructure from this persistent threat. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ended a decade-long Microsoft program that allowed Chinese nationals to work on sensitive Pentagon cloud systems, a practice exposed by ProPublica as a significant vulnerability. Hegseth, describing the program as a breach of trust, has ordered a third-party audit of Microsoft's digital escort system and a separate Pentagon investigation to determine if malicious code was inserted, emphasizing that such risks are unacceptable in today's cyber threat environment. The program, a legacy of the Obama-Biden era, relied on underqualified U.S. contractors to oversee Chinese engineers, raising concerns about espionage and data security. Hegseth's directive also mandates all Defense Department vendors to eliminate Chinese involvement in cloud operations, reinforcing a commitment to safeguarding U.S. military networks. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith is demanding transparency from the People's Forum, a tax-exempt nonprofit accused of acting as an unregistered agent of the Chinese Communist Party while inciting violence across the U.S. In a letter sent September 4th, Smith called for the group to provide donor lists, contracts, and communications by September 18th, citing its $20 million in pro-China funding and role in disruptive protests, including a criticized Times Square rally and violent demonstrations against immigration and customs enforcement. Failure to comply could lead to subpoenas, IRS referrals for tax-exempt status revocation or criminal charges under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, as Smith argues the group's actions undermine American interests while exploiting taxpayer benefits. A federal appeals court has blocked President Trump's attempt to deport suspected members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua using the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a wartime statute, ruling that the influx of illegal immigrants does not constitute an invasion, as required by the law. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, in a 2-1 decision, sided with immigrant rights lawyers, arguing that the law was not intended for use against criminal gangs during peacetime, despite Trump's claims that Tren de Aragua, designated a foreign terrorist organization, poses a significant threat through activities like kidnapping and extortion. Critics, including dissenting Judge Andrew Oldham, argue the ruling undermines executive authority and public safety, allowing dangerous individuals to remain in the U.S. The case is likely headed to the Supreme Court, highlighting ongoing tensions between judicial oversight and Trump's aggressive immigration policies. A federal judge in Boston has struck down the Trump administration's attempt to freeze $2.2 billion in research funding for Harvard University, deeming it an unconstitutional overreach that violated the school's First Amendment rights. Even though there is no constitutional mandate for universities to receive taxpayer dollars, U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs, an Obama appointee, argued the administration used allegations of antisemitism as a pretext for a broader ideological assault on elite universities, failing to follow proper procedures under the Administrative Procedure Act and Title VI. While acknowledging Harvard's shortcomings in addressing campus antisemitism, Burroughs emphasized that the funding cuts, which, he alleged, halted critical research on issues like tuberculosis and veterans' mental health, lacked a direct connection to the stated concerns. The ruling, a setback for efforts to hold universities accountable, may embolden institutions resisting federal oversight, though the administration plans to appeal. The House of Representatives, in a 215-207 vote, tabled a resolution to censure Representative LaMonica McIver, a Democrat from New Jersey, and remove her from the Homeland Security Committee over her alleged assault on ICE officers at Newark's Delaney Hall Detention Facility in May 2025. Proposed by Representative Clay Higgins, a Republican from Louisiana, the censure aimed to address McIver's actions, which conservatives argue compromised her oversight role and disrespected law enforcement, especially given her federal indictment for impeding officers. 5 Republicans, Representatives Don Bacon and Mike Flood, both from Nebraska, Dave Joyce and Mike Turner, both from Ohio, and David Valado of California, joined every Democrat in voting to table the measure, while 2 Republicans, Representatives Andrew Garbarino of New York and Nathaniel Morin of Texas, voted present, revealing internal GOP divisions on immigration enforcement and political discipline. McIver maintains the charges are politically driven, but critics contend her conduct erodes trust in congressional accountability. Washington, D.C. has filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration, contesting the deployment of National Guard troops in the Capitol as an overreach of federal authority that undermines the city's autonomy. D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab argues that the presence of thousands of troops, many from out of state, constitutes an involuntary military occupation and violates the Home Rule Act, which grants the city limited self-governance, even as the city's mayor acknowledges the success of the National Guard presence. While the administration claims the deployment is necessary to address a public safety emergency, critics, including local officials, assert that crime rates have been declining, and the move is politically motivated to target Democrat-led cities, even as statistics in major urban areas are being questioned as corrupt and incomplete. A recent California ruling deemed a similar deployment in Los Angeles illegal, though the president's control over DC's National Guard may complicate the case. The lawsuit reflects resistance to federal efforts to restore order, potentially prioritizing local control over public safety. The Department of Justice has initiated a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, focusing on allegations of mortgage fraud stemming from her misrepresentation of multiple properties as primary residences to secure favorable loan terms. The probe, prompted by Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte, targets Cook's mortgage applications for properties in Michigan, Georgia, and Massachusetts, where she allegedly falsified documents to obtain lower interest rates and better tax treatment. This unprecedented scrutiny of a Fed governor, coupled with President Trump's attempt to remove her, raises serious questions about integrity at the central bank, with Cook's legal challenge delaying any resolution. The investigation underscores a broader push for accountability among public officials, though some critics argue it reflects political targeting. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo announced plans to phase out all childhood vaccine mandates, positioning the state as the first to fully eliminate such requirements. Ladapo, speaking in Valrico, Florida, called the mandates an immoral overreach, likening them to slavery, and arguing that parents should have ultimate authority over their children's medical decisions. The initiative, part of a broader Make America Healthy Again commission, aligns with DeSantis' track record of resisting COVID-19 vaccine mandates and other health restrictions. While some applaud this as a victory for personal choice, critics warn of potential public health risks, though Florida's leadership insists informed consent and parental rights must take precedence. The state health department will work with lawmakers to enact these changes, reshaping the national debate on vaccine policy. In a move reflecting deep distrust in federal health leadership, the leftist Democrat governors of California, Oregon, and Washington have launched the West Coast Health Alliance to uphold alleged science-based health policies, particularly on vaccines, in response to perceived politicization of the CDC under President Trump and Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The alliance, announced on September 3rd, aims to provide unified evidence-based immunization guidance amid concerns over the CDC's recent leadership shakeups and budget cuts, which critics argue prioritize ideology over science. While the governors claim to be protecting public health, conservatives view this as an ideological-based overreach by blue states, undermining federal authority and fostering regional division at a time when national unity on health policy is critical. The Walt Disney Company has agreed to pay a $10 million fine to settle Federal Trade Commission allegations that it violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act by failing to properly label YouTube videos as made for kids, allowing unauthorized data collection from children under 13 for targeted advertising. The FTC claims Disney's mislabeling, particularly during the pandemic, exposed young viewers to inappropriate tracking and ads, undermining parental consent. While Disney maintains its commitment to children's privacy and notes the issue was limited to YouTube content, not its own platforms, the settlement mandates a new video review program to ensure compliance. This case highlights the FTC's focus on enforcing COPPA and signals potential scrutiny for other content providers, raising concerns about corporate responsibility in protecting young audiences. Texas has joined 6 other states in banning the sale of lab-grown meat, effective September 1st through September 1st, 2027, under Senate Bill 261, signed by Governor Greg Abbott. The legislation, supported by the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, prohibits the manufacture, processing, possession, distribution, or sale of cell-cultured protein, citing potential health risks like microplastic exposure and the need to preserve traditional livestock markets. Critics argue the ban stifles innovation and consumer choice, with some, like the ironically named Institute of Justice, claiming it violates constitutional rights. However, Texas ranchers and conservative lawmakers view this as a necessary step to safeguard a vital industry and ensure food integrity, despite limited commercial availability of lab-grown meat in the state. As the Israel Defense Forces gear up for a major offensive to dismantle Hamas's stronghold in Gaza City, reports indicate that Hamas is actively preventing civilians from evacuating to safer southern areas, endangering lives by using them as human shields. The IDF has issued warnings to medical officials and international organizations to facilitate the safe relocation of Gaza City's population, with preparations underway to accommodate evacuees in southern hospitals like the European Hospital in Khan Younis. This operation, part of Operation Gideon's Chariots, aims to neutralize Hamas's terror infrastructure while prioritizing civilian safety, despite the group's resistance to negotiation and its history of exploiting Gaza's residents. International criticism of Israel's plan persists, but the IDF's efforts to minimize civilian harm contrast sharply with Hamas's tactics, raising questions about the terrorist group's disregard for the people it claims to represent, and the people, nations, and groups that support them. A young Gaza boy, Abdul Rahim Mohammed Hamdan, known as Abud, was falsely reported killed by Israeli Defense Forces in May 2025, only to be found alive and safely extracted with his mother, Najla, on August 23rd by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The claim, propagated by former GHF contractor and retired Green Beret Anthony Aguilar, alleged the boy was shot near an aid distribution site, a story that gained traction in anti-Israel media and was even cited by Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat from Maryland. The GHF's investigation, using facial recognition and local sources, debunked Aguilar's inconsistent accounts, highlighting the dangers of unverified wartime reporting and the media's role in amplifying misleading and purposely false narratives. This incident underscores the need for rigorous fact-checking to counter propaganda in conflict zones. The European Union has sharply criticized the Chinese Communist Party for its ongoing support of Russia's war efforts in Ukraine, particularly following remarks by CCP leader Xi Jinping at a Beijing parade on September 3rd, where he claimed China stands on the right side of history. The EU's Foreign Affairs Chief, Kaja Kallas, condemned Beijing's alignment with Moscow, highlighting its provision of dual-use components and economic aid that bolster Russia's military aggression. This rebuke comes as evidence mounts of Chinese firms supplying critical technology, such as drone components, to Russia, undermining Beijing's public claims of neutrality. Xi's appearance alongside Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the parade further signaled a troubling anti-Western axis, challenging the rules-based international order. This development underscores the need for Western nations to counter China's growing geopolitical influence with resolve and unity. Russian President Vladimir Putin, speaking in China, asserted that Moscow has never opposed Ukraine's potential membership in the European Union, emphasizing the possibility of a security consensus for both nations, while firmly rejecting Ukraine's NATO aspirations as a threat to Russian interests. He dismissed European leaders' warnings of Russian aggression as hysteria, arguing that Russia's 2022 actions in Ukraine were a response to NATO's eastward expansion into post-Soviet territories. Putin's remarks, made during talks with Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, suggest a willingness to cooperate on issues like the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Though skepticism persists among Western leaders about his sincerity in pursuing peace, this stance underscores Russia's strategic focus on maintaining influence in its sphere while navigating tensions with the West. Recent revelations expose the alarming extent of Chinese state-backed hacking campaigns targeting hundreds of U.S. organizations, including government agencies, critical infrastructure, and private firms, in a relentless pursuit of sensitive data and strategic advantage. Federal advisories highlight the Chinese Communist Party's sophisticated cyber operations, such as the Salt Typhoon Group's infiltration of telecom networks, which have compromised communications of senior U.S. officials and accessed law enforcement wiretap databases. These attacks, ongoing for years, underscore a systematic effort to undermine U.S. national security, with experts warning that Beijing's espionage could disrupt critical systems in a potential conflict. The Biden administration's response has been criticized as inadequate, raising urgent questions about America's cybersecurity readiness against an emboldened adversary. The International Atomic Energy Agency has detected traces of natural uranium at a Syrian site destroyed by Israel in 2007, prompting renewed scrutiny of what many suspect was an undeclared nuclear reactor under the Assad regime. The findings, detailed in a confidential IAEA report, reveal chemically processed uranium particles at one of 3 locations linked to Deir al-Zor, contradicting Syria's claim that the site was merely a military base. While the current Syrian leadership has cooperated with inspections, allowing further sampling in June 2025, the discovery fuels concerns about Syria's past nuclear ambitions and Israel's preemptive strike. Critics of unchecked globalist oversight argue this underscores the need for robust national security measures to counter potential rogue nuclear programs, while others question whether the uranium traces point to Israel's use of controversial munitions, or even truth to the unproven suspicion that Iraqi WMD was, in fact, moved into Syria.
You're listening to Underground USA News.